This is Xpression FM, and I'm Matt Bate, and I will be interviewing now Paul Nurse, who is President of the Royal Society and a Nobel Prize winner. So I'm very honoured to have you in the studio, Paul, and thanks for coming in. Have you enjoyed Exeter so far today?
Well, I'm pleased to be here with you as well, and the weather, of course, is wonderful.
Oh, the weather is classic Exeter. But anyway, enough about the weather. You're President of the Royal Society, which is, of course, an organisation that has included previous presidents such as Sir Isaac Newton, Samuel Pepys, Ernest Rutherford, and now you've had the chance to be president yourself. Have you enjoyed your 4 years so far in the role?
Yes, I have. It's a very interesting role because Royal Society, it's a bit of a funny name really, is the Academy of Science for the UK. It was the first proper science academy, and it's been really quite important for promoting science for 350 years. And what I've found is in my time for the last 3.5 years is that I've had to play quite an important role in trying to maintain support for science. So I've had to get to know all the politicians, persuade them science is really important for the economy and for the quality of life, and also culturally, and to keep the funding up. So that's been quite an important part of my job.
And you mentioned there that you have to engage with politicians quite a lot. Do you find that difficult? Do they listen?
Do you know they do? I think we're often always critical of politicians, but in my experience, if you spend time talking to them, they get it. And the present government, and actually also the Labour government before it, both have got it. They both understand the importance of science. They could still put more money into it, and we still have to keep the pressure up. But basically, I think we've won that battle. And Britain is good in that respect, because I go to other countries where that isn't really quite the case. So I'm frankly quite satisfied with where we are.
And in the last few weeks, Exeter University's own Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Nick Tolbert, who you've just met, he was elected a Fellow of the Royal Society. What does this mean for Nick and the university? Well,
I've known Nick for quite a long time. In fact, we were both PhD students in the same department in Norwich, in the University of East Anglia. So I'm personally delighted that he's been elected. And I'll be looking forward to him coming June or July. I think we take him into the society, and with his fellow cohort that's been elected this year, so that's good. I think it is good for Exeter. I think it's good that you have individuals like Nick in leadership positions who are excellent researchers, because too often you get those that become leaders, they are too bureaucratic, they don't really know enough about how research is done. And I think it's great that Nick has been elected, and it'll be good for Exeter.
As well as being President of the Royal Society, another big part of your life was winning the Nobel Prize for Physiology or Medicine back in 2001?
2001.
2001?
Yeah.
That was for your work on the cell cycle. And how did it feel to win a Nobel Prize, which can be considered, I suppose, the peak of a scientist's career?
Well, yes. I mean, it's great, of course. I mean, because it's the only prize, science prize, that's sort of generally known throughout the world. I'd won some prizes before, and they just are not as important as a Nobel Prize. It was funny when I was told. I didn't really quite believe it. I was actually in an interview with Watson, with Jim Watson of the Watson and Crick, and we were talking about getting funding for a museum about Mendel in Brno in the Czech Republic. And somebody came in and said, could you turn on your mobile phone? You know, I'm over 40, so my mobile phone's always off. You know, it's just like that. And I switched the phone on, and there was this sort of rather heavy Swedish accent, and I didn't quite get it. And I thought they were asking me to comment on somebody else who had won the Nobel Prize, but in actual fact, they were telling me that I'd won it, although I had to play it back several times before I was sure. Then I went back into the meeting with Jim Watson. I said, well, I've got to leave now because I think I've won the Nobel Prize.
That's quite an excuse, actually, when you're leaving a meeting.
Not bad, is it?
And with science generally as well, the 21st century and the 20th century have seen some huge leaps in science. Looking forward to the next 10, 20, maybe 50 years, where do you think the next great leap will come?
Well, I think science is always moving. It's always interesting. You sometimes get people say, oh, we now know everything and now all we have to do is think about applying it, for example. That is always shown to be wrong. Scientific discoveries come up all the time. In my 40 years career, I've seen that time after time after time again. So it's really, really important. Where do I think it'll go in the future? I think we've got these great questions in physics. Dark energy, dark matter. I mean, we didn't know about it 10, 15 years ago, and now we realise that the majority of maths we can't even observe in the universe. That's
amazing. All the work with the Large Hadron Collider and so on. Am I correct?
Well, it's actually both astronomical and, with the telescopes and in satellites, and also the LHC, as you said. My daughter, by the way, is a physicist and works at the LHC, so that's...
brilliant. So you've got the sort of cross-dimensional side that I can imagine that helps the role quite a lot.
Absolutely. She
prepares you for the physics questions.
Yeah, she's always asking me the difficult questions. She's the real boffin, actually, in the family. But anyway, so those are really big questions. In biology, and because I'm a biologist, I see several things. I actually think we're going to see ecology and evolution coming closer and closer to the molecular and cellular and developmental biology. And I think Exeter's rather well placed for that because it's good in both of those areas. So that's one thing. And then the second, which Exeter is also thinking about, is understanding life in terms of a complex system. And that's something that interests me, has interested me all my life. And I think now we have the tools to be able to analyse what it is that life is, particularly at the level of the cell, which is where I work.
It's certainly great to hear that there are areas of hope in science, because often it's all doom and gloom you hear in the news, whereas it's great to hear that there is advancement. And you mentioned What is Life there? That's the name of the talk that you're about to give to final year and second year biology undergraduates. What advice would you give them now as they go out into the big wide world?
Well, I think if they're in, two things I'd say. Of course, many will not go on to be scientists, and all I would say to them is make use of what you learnt about how to do science in whatever part, whatever thing you do in your life. I mean, that's really, really important. And related to that, curiosity. Have a great curiosity about the world. It's a fantastically interesting place, and try and maintain that curiosity throughout the rest of your life. If you are interested in doing research, I think it's great. I think it's a privileged job to do. You can just investigate things that interest you, and that is the point. Don't think about too much about am I going to get a job to do this, and this? Just do something that interests you. And do it well, and everything else will look after itself.
Because a lot of people are unsure of what they're going to do. They're the lucky few that know they got their life planned, and I envy them myself. But would you any advice to people that literally don't know what to do? They've done their biology degree, and they're now going out there.
Well, they have to think about what you want to do, and I mean, I do think that it's quite important to do that. But it's crucial to do something that interests you. So don't just think about, what's the best way that I'm going to earn a salary? I know people think a lot about that. Make sure you're doing something that excites you. Because if you're excited about what you do, if you're interested in what you do, everything else will eventually work. It just is like that. But if you just sort of think, in a sort of more functional way,
so passion is key, really.
You want passion, absolute passion. Yeah.
Excellent. And also there'll be a few academics listening to this broadcast. If they're in their labs at the moment, results aren't going their way, and they've hit a dead end, maybe time and time again. Is there any hope that you can give them? Is there light at the end of the tunnel?
Well, all I can say there is that 90% of what I've ever done in the lab has been a failure. So you do have to learn to live with failure. If you're at the cutting edge, then you will fail a lot. If you're behind the cutting edge, you can actually be more successful because you can predict what's happening. So if you're doing something important, you've got to live with failure because you're going to get a lot of it.
Well, thank you very much. I'm sure that will be a ray of hope to all academics out there struggling with their experiments. Just one final question from the main part of the interview. What would you say has been the most important discovery in the last 100 years in science, and just on a personal level that you feel has really aided the field?
Well, as a biologist, I think it has got to be the birth of molecular biology, with the focus on information storage in DNA and how that storage is then translated into what living organisms are. And that really is the focus of molecular biology, in actual fact, information flow, and how that comes about. So that started in the 1950s, and the foundations were laid up to about 1980, and we're still building on those advances.
Excellent. Well, Paul Nurse, thank you very much for coming in today. And you very kindly agreed to take part in my usual breakfast show feature here on Xpression FM, which is called My Friday Breakfast Apprentice.
You're making me feel nervous now.
You're going to feel even more nervous in a second.
Okay.
This is the Friday Breakfast Apprentice here on Xpression FM, and every week I grill candidates on their suitability to be a guest on my show. And I wonder whether Paul Nurse, who is here today, President of the Royal Society and Nobel Prize winner, do you think that is enough to get him across the line? Do tweet in your views. The way this works, of course, is that you can just get in touch at Xpression FM, #hired or #fired. And it'd be great to hear your views after this feature. And yeah, thank you, Paul, for being so game to come on and do this.